That's 466 Southwest 3rd, 466 Southwest 3rd, 49. And that's going to be the case that we're relying upon in asking that Ms. Mathis's testimony, wherein she said she didn't recall that be deemed inconsistent, and just the portions that we asked her about to be admitted into evidence under 803.26.
It is inconsistent, but under the other statute, the extrinsic evidence can't come in unless the prior statement is denied. It is inconsistent. It's just it's clear. It also has to be denied, and she doesn't deny it. She just says she feels. I'll revisit that when you all want to. Let's just do as much testimony.
Yes, sir. I'm just saying we're relying upon State v. Davis.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
State ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Let's bring in the jury. You can be seated. Stay away from the call.
Stay away from me.
Hands away the call.
Yes, Your Honor.
General, you can proceed.
Thomas Bible. If you would stand up there.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm if the evidence you're about to give in the hearing of this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please have a seat.
Please give us your name.
Sandra Colleen Bible.
And you go by Colleen?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. Ma'am, if I can direct your attention back to January of 2007, where were you living?
1121 Glider Avenue.
And how long had you lived there?
About 6 months.
About 6 months?
Since July.
Since July?
Mhm.
Where was that in relationship to Chipman Street?
It was on the corner of Glider and Chipman.
If I can direct your attention back to Monday morning at about 1:45 a.m., do you recall someone knocking at your door?
Yes, ma'am. I was woke up by the police.
And was your attention directed to a location?
Yes, there was a car parked in front of the house at the stop sign.
And what type of car was it?
A silver 4Runner, I believe.
Now, were you asked about whether or not you had seen the car earlier?
Yes, ma'am.
Had you seen the car earlier?
No.
Had you been outside earlier?
I'd been on the porch about midnight.
About midnight, was the car there?
No.
Directing your attention to Exhibit 27, you recognize Exhibit 27?
Yes, ma'am.
What is Exhibit?
I'm sorry.
What is Exhibit 27?
That's the corner where I lived. If you're looking across the street.
And so this is Glider here, and that's Chipman Street.
Yes, ma'am.
Exhibit 28. What are we looking at here?
That's the stop sign in front of the house. That's where the car was parked.
And is that the car we're seeing at the top?
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to Exhibit 27 and 28 in as evidence.
Any objection? No objection, Your Honor. That will be received.
Now, if I could look at here on Exhibit 427. If you could take a look here, do you recognize a Chipman and Glider on this diagram?
Yes.
On this aerial view? Do you see on this aerial view where your house is, or house was?
Right here.
Can you, using that red marker, can you use an X to mark where your house was? And on this aerial map, do you see where the 4Runner was at 1:45 when the police knocked on your door? That's located here in Knox County.
Yes, ma'am.
That's what's.
Cross-examination.
Miss Bible, when you saw this car parked in front of your house, you didn't see anybody around the vehicle as far as, you didn't see the vehicle get dropped off, is the point.
No, sir.
And so you certainly didn't see Eric Boyd there
No, sir.
or anybody else in the
No,
car.
sir.
You were in your house sleeping.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything to redirect?
No, sir.
You can step down. Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Keith Dubow. Thank you. And Your Honor, she free to go?
Any objection? No. You're free to leave, Mr. Bible. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give in the hearing of this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, sir.
Please have a seat, Officer.
Please give us your name, sir.
I am Keith Dubow with the Knoxville Police Department.
And what do you do with the Knoxville Police Department?
I am a lieutenant. I am the executive officer for the West Patrol District and also the commander of the Special Operations Squad.
How long have you been with the Knoxville Police Department?
24 years.
Direct your attention back to January 2007. Were you so employed?
I was.
I want to direct your attention to the investigation involving Shannon Christian and Chris Newsom. Were you involved in preparing 2316 Chipman Street for a search warrant?
I was.
Explain to us that process.
I wasn't intimately involved in the process so much. Myself and another officer, Officer Josh Schaefer, were at an advanced school for SWAT. I believe it was Lieutenant Jeff Stiles called us about a block away from there and said we had, our criminal investigative division had secured a search warrant for that particular residence, that the detectives were going to attempt to do a knock and talk. They were going to try to gain compliance entry into the residence, and if nobody came to the door, forced entry was needed, we would approach and enter the residence itself.
Now, is that because you're a member of SWAT?
Yes.
And so what was the, I guess, the plan in entering the residence? What's your plan when you enter the residence to prepare for a search?
Depending on the layout of the house, and of course this one unfolded, we didn't have a lot of information going into it, but basically as safely as possible, clearing through the residence. Our job as the tactical unit of the SWAT team is to basically make a safe working environment for everybody. So we secure the scene looking for either victims of the crime or suspects involved in the activity. So we basically secure a residence, secure an area, and just provide a safe working environment so that the detectives and the folks in the criminal investigative division can come back and do their business.
And is that what you did for 2316 Chipman Street?
We did.
If you could share with the jury what you did on January 9th, 2007.
Once a couple of the detectives had gone on and attempted to make contact, and they were unsuccessful. They called us up, motioned us up. We moved up. I was the first one walking into the residence, walked into a closed off area, front porch, and there was a blanket over the doorway. I pulled it away. We announced police search warrant. Entered through and into the living room, and just we flowed through and kept clearing. I moved through the living area into a side bedroom, and then continued through into a bathroom area until the whole house was secured.
And directing your attention to the diagram, do you recognize that diagram to be a layout of the house?
I do.
If you don't mind, if you could show the ladies and gentlemen of the jury the path that you took and put in the house.
Absolutely. If you look here, this is the front of the area. As we move through, here's this little enclosed front porch. You come through, and this is the entrance to the house. The blanket was here, pulled it away, walked into this living room. There's a little entryway back into this bedroom here. So we went through, I can't remember who came in, but I came this way. Of course, as we're going through, people are flowing. The whole team's just kind of working together and flowing. But I come through here into the bedroom and then into this little bathroom area and then step into this bedroom. And then by that time, everybody's calling clear, 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 clear. And then I call for a back clear, which is we had one area, I believe it was in this area. That was the ceiling. It was unsecured. So there's an area that we hadn't cleared yet, but everything else was cleared. So I don't know if you want me to keep going. Sure. So as I call for this black back clear and look into the kitchen, I noticed in the corner a trash can that was oddly out of shape. Lieutenant Fortner was in here. We work together, so we see each other. But I put it in the trash can. Lieutenant Fortner sees me and looks at the trash can. He knows what I'm thinking. I know what he's thinking. He brings his weapon up to bear. I bring my weapon up to bear, and I advance on the trash can. I pop that trash can open, and the victim, Shannon, was in there. So that's how we got to that point.
Were you able to determine whether or not she was dead?
Yes, ma'am. There was no signs of life in the victim. She was apparently deceased.
I'm going to show you exhibits 34, 35, and 36. Do you recognize exhibits 34, 35, and 36? I do. And what do you recognize them to be?
The trash can I just mentioned, and then the victim's body in the trash can right there.
Exhibits 34, 35, and 36 in this evidence?
No, yes, Your Honor. That can be received.
Exhibit 34, what are we looking at here?
The trash can itself.
35?
The same with the victim in it.
And 36?
The same.
Now, once you found the victim and determined she was deceased, what did you then do?
I immediately notified Lieutenant, let me see, it may have been Sergeant at the time, Snarley. He was over the investigation, pretty much. He was the supervisor over it. We still had business to conduct, so we kind of turned that over to them. And then I don't know if Lieutenant Stiles and I then left, but we went to get some equipment, come back. We still had the attic. I think we had some outside areas we still had to secure as well. So we just kept doing our business.
On January 11, 2007, did you have the occasion to assist in the apprehension of Mr. Davidson?
I did.
If you could, tell us about that, please.
Again, this is a couple of days later, so Officer Schaefer and myself were still at the school, attending the school, and we got called back to that one. This time we were called back to over at 220 Carrick Street where the police academy was. Lieutenant Doug Stiles at that time was there and said we had the suspect located and we were going to take him into custody.
So what did you then do?
I made a plan for chemical agent deployment, so the discussions were back and forth, how, why, and what. And my specific job was to come up with a chemical agent deployment plan, which I did, loaded gas, weapons, and everything else. The general plan was we were going to drive up in our armored vehicle, our hot zone vehicle, and surround the house, call the suspect out, hopefully gain compliance that way, or deploy chemical agents and try to force him out of the house.
Explain to us what happened.
So as we approached the house and got out and did the call out, the suspect came to a window on the west side of the house and placed his hands on the windows and I guess surrendered from a window inside the house. We approached. After a couple of questions, I broke the window out of the house and we pulled the suspect out of the house and had taken him into custody.
And what did you then do?
Loaded back up and went back to my school and finished the school out.
If I can direct your attention to the wall, you recognize Exhibit 268?
I do.
And what is Exhibit 268?
It is the house the suspect was in.
Exhibit 269?
The same.
I'd like to move Exhibit 268 and 269 in this evidence.
No objection, Your Honor. That can be received.
And that was Marcus Davidson that was taken into custody?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
Ask what?
cross-examination.
Lieutenant, is it Lieutenant Dubow?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So your involvement in this investigation had to do with you being on the SWAT team, is that correct? To assist
Yes, sir.
the detectives?
Special Operations Squad, but yes, SWAT.
Okay. And I know when you said you made entry into the home, was the door secure?
No.
Okay. It was unlocked?
I believe it was unlocked. We did not use any type of breaching device.
Okay.
I'm trying to think. I know the blanket was over the door, and I believe it was just unlocked and we opened it.
And when you were talking, again, I certainly am following what you're saying. When you made entry and everybody's flowing, you're talking about the unit as a whole that's proceeding into the home. Is that correct?
Yes.
And as you're proceeding, some of the team members are branching off to make sure that your sides and your flanks are secure, that there's not going to be any sort of threat or anybody
Yes.
in one of the other rooms. So you have people, team members branching off and securing different locations as the main team is moving forward. Is that correct?
It wasn't a very big residence, so
It's about 800, 900 feet, something like
Yes,
that. Okay. So it didn't take you long to flow through the building. And when you were telling the jury that you turned and you saw the trash can, sort of oddly shaped or oddly looking, and drew your attention, and you looked at your partner and he knew what you were thinking. When you saw that, you had a concern that perhaps there could be someone concealed there, is that correct?
yes, sir.
Not that there was a body in there.
Yes, sir.
And you were trying to make sure that there's not a threat or somebody with a gun or something like that. And then I guess you made sure that the rest of that location was secure, weren't any suspects at that location, correct?
Yes, sir.
Right. And so then later on you were contacted again because you're with the SWAT team, or what did you say, it was Special
Operations.
Operations team. Was because at that point in time you had at least, or did somebody with the law enforcement had determined the location that Mr. Davidson, Lamarcus Davidson, where he was at. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that would have been one of the detectives? Or you were just contacting to say, hey, dude, this suspect is in this location, get him. Is that kind of
Yes, sir.
summarizing it?
Out of my purview.
There were other officers who were handling the investigation.
Yes, sir.
You were contacted to apprehend him, correct?
Yes, sir.
And so there was discussion about using chemical agents.
Yes, sir.
And so you're not aware of the circumstances as to how law enforcement learned that Lamarcus Davidson was holed up in that house?
No, sir.
Okay. So you wouldn't have been aware whether or not it was Mr. Boyd that assisted and told law enforcement where he was hiding?
No, sir.
And I think you said that you got to the scene and there was at least, gave him an opportunity to come out peacefully. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And he chose that, he came out.
He came out.
Okay. One second. I don't have any more questions, officer.
Okay, correct. Thank you. You can step down. Thank you, officer.
Thank you, sir.
Gerald Smith.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give in the hearing of this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, sir.
Please have a seat.
Give the jury your name, please.
Gerald Smith.
Are you currently employed or are you retired?
I'm retired, sir.
Tell the jury a little bit about your involvement in law enforcement arena.
Yes, sir. My background is in the field of forensics, actually forensic science to begin with, and then I ended up getting into the crime scene processing crime scene detail. So I actually ended up, once I finally retired, 45 years in the field of forensics. And actually, on the time period of this case, I was with the Knoxville Police Department.
Prior to that, were you employed by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation?
Yes, sir, that's correct. I was with the state for 27 years, mainly in the forensics or in the crime laboratory. Actually in Nashville for 2, Chattanooga for 5, and then I was the regional supervisor here in Knoxville.
Back in 2007, specifically January 2007, say you were employed by the Knoxville Police Department?
Yes, sir.
Crime scene specialist?
Yes, sir. The actual title, the payroll title would have been senior evidence technician, but I worked in the forensic unit in the crime scene detail. I worked totally in the field, processing scenes, collecting evidence, and working with the needs of both the officers and the investigators.
Tell the jury what it is you did at that time in terms of processing the scene.
I oftentimes use the word processing. A lot of times the types of scenes I would go to could be anywhere between a vandalism to a burglary and then all the way up to a homicide type case. But when you say processing, that includes a lot of things. Identifying what's going on there. Your goal is to try to end up painting a picture so that can help the investigators determine indeed what has happened in that scene. Do a lot of photography, fingerprint processing in a scene, sometimes other special things like special lights or special chemicals. But the goal is always just to collect the evidence, identify it, secure it, make sure it's protected, and then collect the evidence, and then whether it be through just photography or actually collecting items of physical evidence.
Directing your attention, first of all, to a scene at 1800 Reynolds Street on January 11th. You recall going to that location, being asked to go to that location?
Yes, sir. In the afternoon of that day, which was actually a Thursday, I'd been on my days off during some of the other activity that was going on in this case. But as I came in to work on that day, shortly before 4 o'clock, heard the radio call come out for forensics to come to that location, and I responded.
And when you responded, what's the first thing you did if you recall?
Actually, the first thing I did, and I always try to do this, is find out who is there and who is in charge of the scene and what has happened prior to me getting there. Try to discuss with them exactly some of the things that they are looking for me to do while I'm there. But initially, go up, observe the scene, talk to the lead people who are there, and then begin processing and collecting the evidence.
And did you get an idea of what had gone on prior to you arriving and what they wanted you to do?
Yes, sir. Upon arrival, I was informed that the Special Operations Squad had actually taken into custody Lamarcus or Lamarcus Davison there at that scene. I could observe a window that had been broken out that Mr. Davison had been taken out of the house through that window. It was my understanding. Initially, also, they gave me a couple of items of clothing that he had that they had taken off of him. So I immediately had to collect those and secure those, but then I began on the house.
And beginning on the house would involve what?
First of all, taking a series of pictures, try to identify, when you look at items at a scene or at a house, you're mainly trying to determine what may or may not have some type of evidentiary value. Maybe some way you're going to be able to link a suspect back to the original crime scene through the collecting. So I mainly just identified what was there, take pictures of what was there, and then begin that collection.
So the first thing was to take pictures of items in place where they are, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct. That's the normal procedure to show up with a camera around my neck and begin that first.
and then collect anything that might be have evidentiary value.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
If I could show you a series of photographs that you took that day, tell us what we're looking at. Exhibit 268, I believe that's already been introduced into evidence.
That would be the, coming up from the driveway, there was a slight hill going up to this house at 1800 Reynolds. I had gotten to 1800 Reynolds just off of Western Avenue. And as I arrived there and I walked up, that's the first thing I observed. And I also observed that disturbance or activity had occurred in that northwest room of the house, which is was kind of the front living room, I guess you could say. And that window on the side had been broken out.
Talking about this window right here.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And that sign, realty sign, was it associated with that house?
Yes, sir, that it was. There was a realty sign in the front yard.
Next picture.
This is a picture from inside, and actually, through this picture, you can observe many of the items that I collected. Do I have a pointer too, sir? I don't. Is this?
Yes.
See if it works, and they get out of the way.
Right.
It work?
Yeah.
Oh, is it there? I'm losing it.
Oh, yeah, okay. It'll show up here.
Oh, okay. There was in the center of the room this folding metal chair sitting right in the center of the room. I had a black hoodie, zippered sweatshirt. Here on the floor was a cell phone. Here on the floor also was a Tasco set binoculars. Over in the corner there was a gray sweatshirt, and then there was a pair of black and silver shoes behind it that can be seen here. That is Captain Holliday was on the scene. He was the captain in the Criminal Investigation Division, and the other person in the window is Sergeant Snodderly, who was also with the Criminal Investigation Division.
Okay. Next picture.
Just a better close-up showing the cell phone, the black hoodie. Again, you can see a better picture of the shoes over in the corner and the gray sweatshirt, just showing them up closer.
And that will be exhibit 271 when we introduce them. Exhibit 272.
272 was a Verizon Motorola cell phone, and in 2007 we would have said that was a flip phone, I believe is what we would have called it.
All right. And obviously some broken glass around it.
Yes, sir, this is just below the window that had been broken out for the Special Operations Squad.
273.
This is actually just a cell phone charger. That's actually the front wall and the front window of that northwest corner room.
That's the same room as the other items that you told us about?
Same room, but it wasn't shown in that overall picture. That's the front wall.
It's exhibit 273, exhibit 274.
That's the brand name was Tasco, a small set of binoculars that was there on the floor in that room.
275.
275 was that black hooded zipper sweatshirt, and there were actually several items inside that front pocket that I took out and collected at that time.
Do you recall what those items were in the pocket? Or?
Yes, sir, there were actually several. One was a set of lip gloss type stuff or lip smacker tube. There was a goodies pen, a broken nail clipper, a rolled up $1 bill, some torn pieces of paper with numbers and names on them. There were 2 or 3 of those, a couple of nickels, and but most significantly, I guess there was a 9-shot 22 caliber revolver in that pocket.
That was a 275, 276.
Yes, sir. This is where I've taken the the revolver out of that pocket and to start to look at it and check on whether or not it was loaded and identify. This was a Sentinel high standard revolver.
Was it loaded?
9-shot. No, sir, it was empty.
Did you find any bullets that would be associated with it?
No, sir, there were no cartridges found at the scene.
That'd be Exhibit 276, 277.
Yes, sir, that's just a close-up showing the brand name. It was a Sentinel. The actual model number was R103, and the serial number of that revolver was 1540183.
279.
This is where we have opened up the revolver and just indicating that it was empty. There are no cartridges in that cylinder. It is a 9-shot 22 caliber cylinder weapon.
And again, if shot, it would not eject any spent casings, is that correct?
That's correct. It was a revolver, and if shot, the cartridge cases would remain in that cylinder.
280.
Over in the corner of the room, there was this gray sweatshirt, and I actually ended up later on removing the sweatshirt and showing these Nike black and gray tennis shoes that I recovered from there. There was also a grape soda bottle, Food Club or Food City brand, and it was empty also.
281.
That photo, I've just removed the gray sweatshirt, showing you the Nike shoes and the grape soda bottle.
And that's all the pictures. Now, these items that were of interest to you, what did you do about collecting them?
Each of those items was collected. I would have marked them and identified the time I collected them, where I found them and things like that, and then sealed them, and eventually, as I finished my duty that day, I would have placed them in the KPD property unit.
And would they remain sealed, those items you see, confiscated and sealed, will they remain sealed until they were forwarded for further examination by somebody else?
Yes, sir, they would have remained sealed. Then at some point, the lead investigator and the lead forensics person in the case would identify what needed to go on for further processing. I did some individual processing myself prior to sealing, like dusting for fingerprints and things like that.
Now, which items would you dust for fingerprints prior to sealing?
I actually dusted for fingerprints the revolver. I dusted for fingerprints the cell phone and the grape bottle.
And I may approach with what's been marked as Exhibit 330. Actually been opened today, but I'll ask if you recognize this box.
Third.
I think we already opened it.
Sir, can I make one correction? I said I dusted for fingerprints on those items. Actually, I used a technique known as super glue fuming to check fingerprints on the revolver.
Need a knife or something to do it.
Open it up a little bit. Scissors.
Almost need paint.
It's been open once today. Hopefully it can
This is actually that the left shoe of that pair of shoes that was over there in the corner. They're Nike Shocks. If I recall right, the size was 9.5. I would point out also that when I seal something, I would put our case number on it, the date and time I collected it, my initials, and where I collected it on that day. So the same would be on both.
Why do you put the shoes in a can?
I made the determination based on some of the information I had that a volatile accelerant had been used on or during the homicide of Mr. Newsom. And if that is the case, and possibly these shoes were at the scene, you need to seal that volatile accelerant inside a metal can so that at some point in time it can be analyzed.
Can you help me put the lid back on since you got gloves on? Approach with another box, if you recognize that box.
Yes, sir. Again, this information that's written on the packaging material, this is what we would call a gun box. So if we collected a weapon at the scene, we normally put it in a box like this. Again, that same information, date, time, my initials, just so at some point in time I'd be able to identify it again.
And can you unseal that if it's not unsealed? And show us what's in there. Scissors for that.
We must have sealed it back at some point in time. Just so you can, it's safe, that cylinder's empty. Yes, sir. Again, this is that revolver that I collected at the scene. The model number is R103 and the serial number is 1540183 as imprinted on the side of the revolver.
And you say you super glued that to try to get fingerprints off of it?
Yes, sir, that's correct. That's the, you can kind of see a white cast to certain areas as the super glue fume comes up. If there's oil from a fingerprint, latent that has touched it, then you'll be able to see that in that white cast.
Were you able to see any identifiable fingerprints or usable latent prints off that?
No, sir, no usable latents were obtained on this revolver.
Okay, we'll return that.
I would note one other additional thing that was done is the revolver handle was swabbed for what we would hope, or maybe forward to the lab for DNA analysis.
Okay. We move Exhibit 333 into evidence.
Any objection? No objection, and for the record, I don't object to the photographs or the previously interviewed
Photographs momentarily. Any other items marked exhibit number 391, ask you recognize that.
Again, I can recognize this by the information that I placed on it. And this should be inside here, the binoculars.
Okay, care to unseal that and show us what the binoculars look like.
They are the Tasco small set of binoculars that were on the floor there at 1800 Reynolds.
We've been Exhibit 391.
Yes, it's they're
I'll ask you also if you had occasion to process and collect items from a flight planning.
Yes, sir, I did.
Your note reflect when you did that?
Yes, sir, I actually did that processing on the 16th of January, which would have been the Tuesday of the second week.
And tell us about your examination of that vehicle.
The examination was done out at the city impound lot. The vehicle had been towed there from 2224 Ridgebrook, and at the impound lot on the night of the 16th, I went and processed it. Some of the same activity, photographing it, looking for items of evidence, collecting them, then sealing them up just like we did at Reynolds Street.
And similar to that, did you take photos as you processed this vehicle?
Yes, sir, I did.
Exhibit 29, I believe, has already been introduced, perhaps.
This was actually at night. I began somewhere around 7:30 in the evening, and it was dark that evening at the impound lot. And I did that, or wanted it to be dark for some of the things that I did to that car, or with that car. And first thing, I would have taken pictures of the car from all four angles.
Okay, this is
That would have been the rear of the car, tag number 320, Charlie Yankee Sierra.
okay. Exhibit next, 14.
Photo from the driver's side.
Exhibit 14 is already into evidence. 30.
This was a white Pontiac Sunbird LE, and it had some red trim on it.
Exhibit 15.
The front of the vehicle.
And Exhibit 31.
That would be the passenger side, and you can see it printed there on the passenger side, and that would have been impound personnel marking that vehicle with an impound number and the date that it was towed in from Ridgebrook to the city impound lot.
Does that picture depict any damage to the windows?
There was a broken out rear quarter window, as you can see there. Been covered with tape, but I made no determination about how long that would have been.
Okay. Exhibit 32.
Just a couple of pictures inside, looking at the front bucket seats there.
Okay. Exhibit 33.
The rear seat showing that there was a white sweatshirt in the rear seat. And you can see some other items in the floorboard behind the driver's seat.
Exhibit 47.
Close-up of that white sweatshirt that was in the back seat.
Exhibit 55.
This is behind the driver's door. Obviously, there was a can of antifreeze from O'Reilly's, as well as there was a white cotton glove there.
Exhibit 58.
58 is showing there were just numerous items, and I actually ended up collecting a total of 36 items. But this is under the driver's front seat. There were a lot of personal items belonging to individuals, like social security cards and things like that.
Did you have to record the names of individuals on those cards? Or?
Yes, sir, I did. There was actually a whole bunch of personal identification that went to a family with the last name Loayon.
Okay.
Layon, and there were social security cards that indicated to me there was probably a mother and her children's information there. There was also a small purse in that area, coin purse.
Okay. Oops, back at Exhibit 60.
I'm back showing here the passenger side front seat area. At the time I began processing and working with the lead investigator, Investigator Childress, he had requested that I concentrate with the front passenger seat area.
Okay. 61.
Under the front passenger seat or in that floorboard was the matching white cotton glove.
So 2 white gloves.
Yes, sir.
Okay. 66.
66, what I'm trying to show there is there was actually a pawn ticket in the console of the front seats. And that pawn ticket actually was to Adrienne Mathis.
Okay. 69.
69 is not a very good photograph. What I was attempting to show here, and I think maybe we can pick it up, and I was having trouble getting the camera and the flash and everything into the correct area, but right there is the butt of a sidekick holster, a gun holster. Yeah, you can see it much better there. That's the, and this was actually way back underneath that passenger front seat. And it was a weapon holster, a gun holster.
You say that's the front passenger seat that was under?
Yes, sir.
79.
The trunk of the car, in the trunk of the car again were some antifreeze type containers, as well as there was a Wetco 1.25 gallon gasoline container.
Exhibit 8.
Closer up of that gasoline container showing the nozzle, and the nozzle did not have its cap on it. It was open.
You recall if there was any gasoline in that?
A very, very small amount of gasoline was in it, just enough that when I did a little slush to it, I could tell that, you know, I could hear that there was enough in there, and I actually then had to empty it prior to putting it in our property room.
Okay. All those pictures. Now, the items that you found in the car that were of interest, did you confiscate those as you described earlier on processing the other scene?
Yes, sir, I did.
I may approach with the marked exhibit 436 in this box. This a bag in this box, that's correct.
This is the box with the bag in it. Again, there's that information just for my identification, so I know what it is, and my initials where I sealed it when I collected it.
Okay, let's see what's in that.
I would notice that, of course, it's going to be the gasoline can, and I did make myself a note that I emptied the gas out of it.
This is the gas can we saw.
The gas can, again, I've marked it for evidence.
From the trunk.
Yes, sir.
think they'll take it. Exhibit, did I give you that number?
436.
Yeah, 436.
Are you moving it in?
Moving that into,
Any objection? No, Your Honor. Thank you, you see.
next item is marked Exhibit 429.
State's Exhibit 429 would have been that Boss sweatshirt.
Okay, can we have a look at that, please? And those markings on there, that would be markings you did not place there, is that correct?
That's correct, I wouldn't.
Again, was this an item that was sealed up and maintained in property room for later examination possibly?
Yes, sir. And I can actually see that at some point this has gone on, as there is a marking indication that so it's got a TBI marking on it from the laboratory.
Exhibit 429. That's Exhibit 435.
Also in the trunk, and I'm not sure we saw a picture of it, but there was a comforter, bed comforter in the back of the trunk. I collected that. And all my records indicated it was multicolored.
Okay. We'll move in Exhibit 435.
Any objection?
Two envelopes that appear to be similarly marked. Can you tell us what they contain?
One is the glove from the driver's side rear forward, and one is the glove from the passenger side front forward.
Okay.
And again, it appears, in addition to my markings, there are laboratory markings too, where these have gone on to the TBI lab DNA section. You want both open?
Yeah, show the other one too. Show the similarities, I guess. Same type of glove?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. And envelopes labeled Exhibit 430.
Again, this is the holster markings that we've talked about, and then there's also the TBI markings from their laboratory here in Knoxville. It's a small holster that's got Velcro clothes on it.
Is that designed for a handgun?
Yes, sir. A handgun, but beyond that, I wouldn't be able to say revolver or automatic.
We would move in 437, 438, and 430 into evidence.
No objection.
May have two of them.
I think I picked it up right. And I'll also ask you, at some point, were you asked to take a buccal swab from Mr. Boyd?
Yes, sir. I actually did that on the afternoon of the 11th,
Okay.
same day that I'd been on Reynolds. When I got back to the safety building there, Mr. Boyd and Mr. Davidson were there at the safety building. And at one point that evening, or early evening, I took buccal swabs from Mr. Boyd. And that was done in one of the interview rooms. And that's merely swabbing the cheek for DNA standard.
And is that to forward on to the lab? To see
Yes, sir, that's correct. That would be,
useful for their examination?
yeah, that would provide to them the official standard that they would need.
Are you able to recognize Mr. Boyd as being the person who took the buccal swab from on that day?
Yes, sir.
He in the courtroom today?
Yes, sir.
Where, sitting next to Mr. Frazier?
Yes, sir.
And similar to the other items, once you take that, do you seal it up and maintain it in a sealed condition prior to sending it on to the lab or other examinations?
Yes, sir. The Knoxville Police Department has an entire property unit. Once I'm completed with it, if they are not open for the day, then we have sealed, safe type areas where I seal it, and only they can open it.
Yes, sir.
Could we approach for a second, Your Honor? Sure.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, sir.
How long have you been doing crime scene investigation, forensics?
Actually, it began with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. Would have been the middle 90s. The laboratory expanded into a program at that time called Violent Crime Response Team, based upon the fact that we had identified that a lot of times coming into the laboratory, shall I say, the caliber of what we were receiving was not what we wanted. So in addition to more field training for the locals, the TBI also identified the need to have their own violent crime response team. So I did that the last few years out of the TBI, and then for 13 and a half years at KPD.
Okay, so you came from TBI to KPD.
Yes, sir.
And to work with their violent crime response team.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so in approaching, again, I think you've already covered this, but in approaching a crime scene, one of the things that you're doing is you're documenting it, everything as far as the scene, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Securing it to keep it free from contamination.
Yes, sir. Most of the time when I would arrive, the scene would already be secured from the standpoint of any suspect would not be on the scene or anything. So the scene would normally be secure. I would arrive and then begin doing forensic processing.
Gotcha. And you, obviously, as part of your training, you're familiar with a number of different techniques as far as how to process crime scenes correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct. And matter of fact, my last few years at the Knoxville Police Department, I taught their in-service new recruit class in crime scene management processing, as well as our yearly 40-hour necessary training that all law enforcement people had. I would teach the Criminal Investigation Division short classes on the same subject.
So that they were at least familiar with the techniques that the crime scene forensics guys could do as far as
yes, sir.
in assisting them in their investigation of crime.
Yes, sir, and it was certainly an ever-evolving forensics over those years. New techniques, new procedures, DNA kept advancing, so there was always things that needed to be done that maybe the officers had never seen us do before.
And taking us back at this point, DNA is admissible in court, but going back to the 90s, I guess there were a lot of challenges to the admissibility of DNA as far as its reliability.
I was there, sir, at the infancy of DNA within the TBI laboratory. Unfortunately, like many things, the state of Tennessee, we did lag behind some of the other states in the country. But certainly the process has evolved. Smaller and smaller samples are capable of doing it faster and faster and faster. So it took a while, but I think it's the most accepted scientific forensic procedure today.
Gotcha. And so, again, when you went to the location where Mr. Davidson was located, I guess the first thing that you did was photograph and to document the scene as far as its condition. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And when you collected the items, of course, you're recording where you collected them. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
To make sure that all that's on there. Did you do any sort of a crime scene diagram or anything like that?
No, sir, not at this scene.
Okay. And again, I think in your direct you had made a mention of going to that scene with the idea of perhaps going back to another crime scene or linking it back. Would you have said that this was sort of a secondary crime scene or a secondary location? Because again,
yes, sir, certainly. This was really, in a way, it wasn't a crime scene. It was taken into custody of the suspect scene. But certainly you hope that items that would be in the possession of Mr. Davidson, that you immediately around him, if you could collect them and if there was any way to link them back to the original crime scene, that would be one of the goals that you would have.
And that would have been the house at Chipman Street was the primary crime scene.
Yes, sir. There were actually two, the house and the railroad side.
And at some point, on the 11th, you processed the house where Mr. Davidson was at. You collected those items and secured them, put them into the evidence lockers, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And then later on that day, you went to KPD, correct?
Yes, sir.
And my client, Mr. Boyd, was there, and you collected a buccal swab or a buccal swab?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that's a collection of skin cells from inside the mouth, which contain DNA.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right. And again, that was secured, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the idea was that that DNA sample collected from Mr. Boyd could later then be tested against evidence maybe found at some of the other crimes.
Against all items that had been collected, not only by me, but by the people that worked the primary scenes.
And so later on, the determination was made that we wanted to look at this white car, correct?
Yes, sir. It was actually done on the 16th.
On the 16th.
We had it. It was at the impound lot. It wasn't going anywhere, so it was a prioritized when we got to it.
And I know that you said that you wanted to go and look at the car in the dark. Could you elaborate a little bit about why you wanted to go there and look at the car?
Yes, sir. I did some processing that the state did not introduce or we did not cover. I actually collected swabs from the passenger side door handle. I did some tape lifts off the floor on the passenger side, the seat on the passenger side. But most specifically, what you're probably asking for is I used a chemical spray on the inside of the car
And
for the determination of possible blood.
Okay, so you used a chemical spray to see if you could find the location of blood?
Yes, sir.
And why would you do that kind of processing in the dark?
Because it luminesces. And if you're in daylight, you don't see the luminescent response to the chemical. So you need total darkness, or best you can. That's part of the process.
So that car was processed with the idea that there may be blood or other biologicals located in there?
It was processed just under normal procedures that I use. It was something that I felt like needed to be done based upon the history of the crimes.
Based on the information that
The information that I had been provided
from the
about the
detective?
crimes. Yes, sir.
Okay, so at least there was a thought that there may be some biological evidence that could be found in the car.
I think it was more of just to make sure.
Okay, so was it also processed looking for any sort of prints or anything like that as well? The car?
Yes, sir. I processed it for fingerprint.
And I think that's when you referenced doing some lifts. Is that what you were talking about?
Yes, sir. I did this actually using a powder. I processed that car passenger side area with a powder, fingerprint powder.
What type of powder did you use?
I use a magnetic powder, black, with a magnetic wand.
Did you lift some prints?
Yes, sir. I
Some
did.
latents? And were those secured?
Yes, sir, they were.
Do you know whether they were later sent off for testing?
We would have done that in-house.
Okay, so that was done in-house?
Technician Shade and Dan Crenshaw in our fingerprint unit were international certified latent fingerprint examiners, and they would have looked at those. There were no matches made from the lifts I made.
Okay. So there were no matches for either Shannon or Christensen?
No matches, period.
Thank you.
Did you discover any evidence of blood or anything in that car?
No, sir. Everything that I did, and I saw no observations of any fluorescent activity that would indicate that to me.
You can sit down. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, John. Oh, yes, sir.
Yes, Your Honor. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's about 4:30. It's been a long and hard day. I'm going to go ahead and let you go. There has been a newspaper reporter here, and there's been a television camera here. So there may be publicity about this trial tomorrow. So again, to remind you and instruct you, if you come into contact with anything in the newspaper or anything on the television or your computers or whatever, I must instruct you to turn away from it as quickly as you can. Don't read anything or don't listen to anything about this case except what you see and hear in the courtroom. I think that does it. We'll start again tomorrow at 9:30. We have a very small docket. So please be here before 9:30. Have a pleasant evening.
Bring your notebooks with you.